Okay, then we're looking here on Daf Ches, not Daf Ches in the Masechet, but in the Yalkut HaBi'urim on the bottom left. And we were wondering why, in the case of Shnios Larayos, the Gemara is looking for a remez min Torah. And if you recall, we offered two approaches. The first approach, which he attributes to the Iyun Yaakov, is that the Isur Shnios is radically different than other Isurim D'Rabbanan. And the reason for that is because it's Gorem Lebitul Mitzvah Min Torah. It will cause a limitation in the mitzvah period Merivia. And also in certain cases where the Torah itself actually encouraged you to marry a relative. But now, as a result of this D'Rabbanan, we're going to have to prohibit such a relative. And therefore, we need some sort of a license from the Torah to give authority to the Chachamim to go ahead and be Mavatel a mitzvah period Merivia. The second approach, which he attributes to the Netziv, is that the reason why Shnios is different than other Yisurim D'Rabbanan is because, in general, when you talk about Yisurim D'Rabbanan, there's some Yisur Midaraisa that were extended. And the Chachamim said that even though the Torah did not go this far, we are going to encompass and include it in the scope of the Yisur. In the case of Shnios Larayos, the Torah said you're allowed to marry this woman. There's no even haschala, there's no beginning of an Isur. You're starting a brand new Isur from naught, and that needs a special life. And this leads us to the Rambam at the beginning of Hilchos Ishus, which you'll see here quoted on page Tes. Yesh noshim acheros shasuros mipi hakabol. The Isurim midivrei sofer ve'in nikros shnios. They say shnios larayos. And the Kesef Mishnah says that he doesn't understand the language of the Rambam when the Rambam says she'asuros mipi hakabbalah. When we talk about a Kabbalah, it sounds like we're talking about an unbroken chain that leads us back to Moshe Rabbeinu, or at least something that's derived from the Yud Gimel Midas Shator Nidreshes by him. And yet, in truth, the Isur Shnios Larayos is only a Gzeras Chachamim. That's the understanding of the Kesef Mishnah. It's not Midirei Kabbalah. For example, if we talk about Megillas Esther on Purim, that might be a Chiyuv Midirei Kabbalah because we derive it from the Psukim in the Tanakh, in Megillas Esther. And the Turei Even, for example, is famous for saying that if you have a suffix whether to read the Megillah on this day or that day, you don't apply the principle of suffix D'Rabbanan L'Kula, because since it's Midivrei Kabbalah, it's like Kidoraisa. We have to go suffix L'Chumra. So you might have a city like Tiberia, you don't know whether you read the Megillah in Tiberia on the 14th of Adar or on the 15th of Adar, you might have to read it on both days to cover your bases. So that's the kasha of the Kesef Mishnah. How could the Rambam upgrade Shnios Larayos to the level of Midirei Kabbalah? And the truth be told that yesterday, if you recall, we spent a little time on the Maharal Prague, who seems to indicate that there might be some sort of quasi-doraisa status to Shnios Larayos. The Lechem Mishnah says that the Rambam uses the language Midivrei Kabbalah based on our sugya, because the Gemara finds a remez in the Torah for the Isur of Shnios Larayos from the pasuk Ki es kol hatoevos ha'el, and that gives it a status of Isur Kabbalah. Now, another possibility which has to be investigated, that's not for us now, the Lechem Mishnah suggests that a takana that goes back to Shlomo HaMelech, and that's the case of Arayos, Shnios Larayos, that might have the status of Divrei Kabbalah, even if it's not actually formally written in the Divrei Kabbalah, in the Tanakh. Okay. I'm just gonna. We have now a discussion about Zeshen Emer Bahen El, the Zeshen Emer Ben Ela. If you may recall, we had that discussion. So I don't know if we have to go through that now, but he has a piece here from Rabbi Chanan Vasim. And he says the following, that, let's go over the Gemara just one time. Daf of Aleph. Let's start with Mason. No. The wrong page here. Okay. One second. I'm just looking. Where do we have a discussion here about? Oh, there it is. So let's look on Daf Chaf Aleph, Amid Aleph, at Lema. So again, we're on Chaf Aleph Amid Aleph, backtracking a little bit for a moment, and we're looking at Lema, which is the last of the thin lines, so the skinny lines, as I call them. Now, Rava said that the word Aleph Lamed, where it says as Kol Toevas Ha'el, is a Lashon Kasha. Pliga, Lema Pliga de Rabbi Levi. Should we assume that Rava is against Rabbi Levi? Dam Rabbi Levi, Kasha Onsham Shal Midos, Yoser Mi Onsham Shal Arayos. Shezen Emer Bahen El, Vezen Emer Bahen Ela. So in the case of Midos, if he cheats someone because his scales are not accurate, then the Torah used the word Ela. And it says, Ki to'avas Hashem elokech tolsa Ela. And the word Ela is a Lashon Kasha, and it's even more severe of a punishment than El, which is the word that we found in To'evas Ha'el in Arayos. So from the fact that Rabbi Levi says that Yosef Mishal Arayos, it means that El is not considered a Lashon Kasha, whereas Rava said that El is a Lashon Kasha. And he said that there's Kashos and there's Rakos, and that's how he derived Shneos Arayos. So the Gemara answers El Kasha, the Ele Kasha Yosef El. In other words, even El in the Parsha of Arayos is also indicative of Kasha. However, the most severe is Ele with a Hey. And the additional Hey upgrades the severity of the punishment for Midos. The Gemara asks on Rabbi Levi Gabi Arayos Nami Oksib Ele. We have a pasuk Ele even by Arayos. He doesn't tell you where the pasuk is. I do. So the Gemara says, so Mikola Toeva said, fine. So in other words, Rabbi Levi wanted to prove that since it only says El by Arias, and in Midos it says Ela, the onech of Midos is even more severe than that of Arios. How can you square now, Rabbi Levi, with the fact that it says Mikola Toevasa Ela, and the word Ela appears also with regard to Arios? So more answers, who the lashon of Ela in the parish of Arios is not coming to teach me how severe of a punishment, but rather lemute midos vikaris. So it's a mute, and it tells you that in the Parsha of Arias it says kares, and you might think that therefore in the case of midos, which is more chamur, it says ele, it would be chayiv kares, and we would apply the principle of kal v'chomer. Mashmalan, that's what the pasuk Ela in the parsha of Arias is a mute to tell you that Arias generates kares, but not midos. Elamai chumrayu, what is the midah of midos vis-a-vis Arias? It can't be the punishment because in Arias you have kares and in midos you not have kares. And the Gemara says, "Hani," in the case of Arias, efshar b'tshuva, but hani in the case of midos, lo efshar b'tshuva. You remember that? That's a review, but I have to admit I forgot it already. So it's a good time to do a review. So getting back to the Alkut Viurim, L'chora Kosher, on the left column on Tes, second paragraph. Al Arayis Yesh Liv Karis, Eich Moel Tshuva, Rashbam Babasa Kosa Shabarayis Moel Tshuva. It's the, I'm not sure why the Rashbam understood that you have to justify tshuva and the efficacy of tshuva in the case of a chiv kares for something. And he holds that in general, when there's a chiv kares, there is no tshuva. You'll have to just simply suffer kares. So Rashbam says that Barayis Mol Tshuva can exceed Shuvu Vanim Shovim. So there's a special pasuk that invites tshuva in the case of Arias. V'chenim laku, and so too if they gave malchus to the person who violated Arias, is nifteru midei kares. That's a Gemara in Makos. That's the Rashbam and Babasa Pech. So the Netziv raises the following kash. It says, "Harei pasuk shuvu banim shovim nitish v'gemara at the end of Yoma l'nim mishavar al mitzvus asay tshuva levad moelis al b'chivei kares vadai eino nifta b'tshuva levad el tshuva tola v'isuri v'marki v'chein kasher masha hevi arashbam masha amru shechayvei kares shaloku niftu b'yad b'dei krusasa shezen emer l'gavi chiyuv kares bilvad aval b'komakom vadi shal niftu b'zeh chiyuv lasos tshuva." The Rashbam seems to indicate that once they get malchus, then they don't have to do tshuva because nifter miyad mikares. So the Netziv says, I don't understand what he's talking about because you're right that malchus will replace kares, but that's only in terms of ownership. That doesn't exempt him from his chiyuv to do tshuva. Now he quotes Rav Elchanan, "Madua nechshav midos chomer mi'arayos mach meseshe b'midos yefshel loshev aleim b'tshuva arayos efshel b'tshuva." Hello, ain't it machmas chomer achet? Sharigam b'midos and yodea mimi gazal yochol lasus tshuva. Don't tell me that there's no possibility in an affair of midos to do tshuva. You just don't know how to identify the nigzal. But if you could, then you do tshuva. In came I do it next of midos chomer me'arayos. What's the Rambam in Hilchis Gneva, Perek Zayin, is it? It says she'achiluk bein arayos lemidosu. Shezeh avera shebein adam lemakom. Shezeh avera shebein adam lechavera. I thought that's a Rambam in Hilchis Tshuva. Okay, fine. Because of she'efshar sharram pirish kain divrei hagemara. Sharayos efshar b'tshuva umidos efshar b'tshuva hainu. Shaveros bein adam lechavera molo tshuva. Afil gabe achilek shechata la mokom faverizu achi ratzes chavero. It means that in the case of midos, there's a double avera. It's both bein adam lemokom and bein adam lechavero. And until you do what's called ritzui chavero, as far as the bein adam lechavero element I mentioned, then there's no tshuva at all, even on the bein adam lemokom element. He tried, but he wasn't able to pacify his friend and get mechila. Then there's no kapara whatsoever. The kapara bein adam l'makom is dependent upon the kapara of bein adam l'chavera. Once he does tshuva, he's guaranteed kapara. Whereas in bein adam lechavero, he might not have kapara at all if he can't get a ritzui from his friend. Ubepanim yafos kosav onesh hamidos chamur mi onesh shal arayos. Shekeven sharayos shehem chayve krisus kapara de tshuva isur. Oshe shal midos hu anius. Oh, he has a medrash that it's an Ishakosha Anius Yosef Mikol Isur. Nimtza Sha'onshav Shalmidas Hu Anius Kosha Yosef Anius Shalarayo Beonshav Shalarayos Shenenash Aleim B'Shar Yisur. He's creating a hierarchy of misery, of suffering, and the greatest suffering is for violating midos because the punishment is Anius, which is even worse than Yisurin than any other punishment. All right, we'll see if we can go back to the Gemara. The last thing we learned was muter adam be'eshes chamin u'be'eshes charga, and we're up to the asur be'bas charga. Bas charga. So that's approximately, shall we say, 15 lines up before the end of Chaf Aleph Amid Aleph. Just 1 second. And he says, Asur b'bas charga. All right, we'll count up from the bottom. I think it's about 11 lines. Let's see if I'm right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines. The Asur b'bas chargo, he says here the Mesifta bas b'no hachorek. Right, so a man marries a woman who has a son from a different marriage, and that son is called chorek. It's like a stepson. The daughter of the stepson is shnios larayos. Why? Shehi nechtas ishto, and this is the granddaughter of his wife. Kegon with Sarah ben Avram, Shmo Yitzchak. So Sarah married Avram and had a son, Yitzchak. Avram died. Nisa Sarah Yaakov. So right, Yaakov is now the stepfather of Yitzchak, who was born to his wife from another husband from Avram. So Sarah's son, Yitzchak, is now a ben choreg to Yaakov, or her second husband. Nasa Yitzchak is Rivka v'yoldalo bas, whose name is Rachel. So Yitzchak, who is the son of Sarah, the wife of Yaakov, gives birth to Rachel. They have Yitzchak and Rivka, and they have a child by the name of Rachel. Rachel is bas chorgo shel Yaakov, right? Because we said that Yitzchak is chorgo of Yaakov. Yitzchak was born to his wife Sarah, but from a different marriage to Avram, and that's us. Now he has a case of chorgo. Chorgo, again, as we said before, would be Sarah's son Yitzchak, as far as Yaakov is concerned. Mutter beishto. He says here, Mutter benesuin im ishto ha'acheres im girsha omes. I didn't catch the names here. It was the Chorgo Mutter Beishto Ubito. So that's diagram number Kuf Pei Beis. Kigon Lisara ben Yitzchak, which I assume she was married to Avram. But anyway, so she has a son by the name of Yitzchak. Vanessa Sarah Yaakov. Now Yaakov marries Sarah as a son from a different marriage by the name of Yitzchak. Yaakov owed Isha Rivka. So in addition to Yaakov marrying Sarah, he has another wife by the name of Rivka. V'yoldalo Rivka es Rachel. Umeis Yaakov. Yitzchak chargo shel Yaakov muto lisas Rivka ishto, meaning ishto of his stepfather. O es Rachel bito shel Yaakov. So Yitzchak, who was born to Avram and Sarah, is Chargo Shel Yaakov, and he's allowed to marry Rivka, the wife of Yaakov, after Yaakov's death, or Rachel, the daughter of Yaakov. The Ashes Chargo okay, so this is the last case that we discussed, Ashes Chargo, which we said her name was Rivka. Ashes Chargo, Amerislo Animu Teres Lecha, Ubiti Asura Lecha. Not sure how to read that. He says, can go on the Ofen Aniskare Rivka Ashes Yitzchak. Right, so Yitzchak, the stepson, married Rivka, who beno Chargo Shel Avram. Did the names all of a sudden change here? We said beno Chargo Shel Yaakov. Now it's beno Chargo Shel Avram. Okay. Rivka Ashes Yitzchak. Shehu, meaning Yitzchak, is Beno Chargo Shel Avram. So Avram is the stepfather, Yitzchak is the stepson, and Yitzchak, the stepson, is married to Rivka. Omer Avram, and Yitzchak, the stepson's wife, says to her husband's stepfather, Ani muteres lecha, biti Rachel asur lecha min haTorah, sharei hi bito shel Yitzchak, b'no shel Sarah ishtech. So you're not allowed to marry your wife's granddaughter, and that's a doraisa. Amachilu kadina beineim, kevin shekalas ishto, lo gozu be'rabbanon, avol bito hi nechtas ishto ve'asur midoraisa. So the daughter-in-law of your wife is not related to you at all, and there's no gzeira d'rabbanan whatsoever. But your wife's granddaughter, that's already doraisa. I'm not sure if the Gemara is going to prove that. Okay, so now we'll talk about Bas Chargo. Now, Bas Chargo is listed here in this as if it were Shneos Larais Midivrei Sofer. The Gemara supposed Bas Chargo de Oraisa. In other words, you're not allowed to marry the daughter of your wife, and that's the Oraisa. The Chsiv, now the Gemara is going psukim. Ervas Isha Ubita Lo Segali. You're not allowed to marry your wife and her daughter. As Bas Benov, as Bas Bito, or your wife and her granddaughter Lo Sika. So why was this case of Bas Chargo mentioned? I'm sorry, of Bas Chargo. Why is it mentioned in the Bryce of Shneos and Storah? Our answer is Mishum de Kaboy Lemisnei Seifa Eishes Chargo. And Eishes Chargo, Merislo Animu Teres Lecho, Biti Asura Lecho. She's the granddaughter of your wife. Biafagav the Biti Asura Lecho Midoraisa. Because the Torah says as Bas Bina Lo Sika, but B'didi Lo Gozu Be'Rabban. I still am Muteres L'cha, complete. So since the Gemara wanted to tell us this Chiddush that she's Muteres L'gamre, even though her Bas is Asur B'Doraisa, therefore Toneration Nami Bas Chargo Asura, even though Bas Chargo is the Doraisa, because it is the granddaughter of his wife. So it really doesn't belong, strictly speaking, in this brisa, but it's here once we mention Eishes part. Gemara says, Yihachi, Yesh kol kach chidush b'mesh abbas asur linose u'be'ima lo gozru chachamim. If this is the chiddush of the brisa that the mother is muteres, but her daughter is a doraisa. So the Gemara is asking, why did the Brisa mention this chiddush in the Reisha? Eishes Chamiv, Nami, Ema Ani Muteres L'cha, Ubiti Asur L'cha. We're going to have the same paradox in the case of Eishes Chamiv. What's the case? Kigon Shenasa Avram es Sarah, Biyolda Lo es Rachel. Bahosif and Nasa es Rivka, Biyolda es Leah. So he's married to two wives, Sarah and Rivka. And he has Rachel as a daughter from his wife, Sarah, and he has Rivka as a daughter and he has Leah as a daughter of his wife Rivka. Umeis, Nisa Rachel Reuven. So Rachel is the daughter of Sarah. It's married to Reuven. The Tamar Rivka. Now wait a second. Rivka is a mother-in-law to Reuven. No, not really. Rivka is married to Avram, and Avram is the father-in-law of Reuven. Because Reuven married his daughter Rachel. So Rivka could say to Reuven, I'm allowed to have a marriage relationship with you because I am not your mother-in-law. I'm married to your father-in-law, but I'm not your mother-in-law. Ubiti Leah asur l'cha Torah. Why? Havya achos ishto. Second. So Leah was the child of Avram and Rivka. And Leah is therefore Bas Chamiv. Correct? Because Avram is a father-in-law to Reuven. How so? Because Avram had Rachel from Sarah, and Reuven married Rachel. So Avram is therefore the father-in-law of Reuven. And now Leah is Achos Ishta. Because Leah and Rachel share the same father, Avram. So they're sisters through Avram, their father. So again, Rivka is allowed to marry Reuven because it's Avram, her husband, who is the father-in-law of Reuven. So Reuven is not her son-in-law. And therefore there's no Isser of Chamoso. But yet, Rivka Eshes Avram had a daughter by the name of Leah. And the status of Leah is Achos Ishto Reuven, because Reuven is married to Rachel, who is the sister of Leah. So here's another case where the mother herself is a Muteres, and the daughter who's born to that mother is Asura. Well, why didn't the Brisa mention that when it was discussing Eish's Chamin? The Gemara answers, Ha Sikole. Beha lo psikolo. In other words, the Brisa would rather choose an erva that is irreversible. For example, the granddaughter of your wife, you can never marry her. Whereas the sister of your wife is lo psikole, because that Isra only applies to Chayel, but after she dies, you're allowed to marry your wife's sister, your late wife's sister. So since it's not an Isra Tmidi, it's not a permanent Isra that's irretractable, rather it is reversible in the case where his wife died. Therefore, the Tana didn't want to use the term Ani Muteres L'cho Biti Asura. Now, we have an introduction to the next sugya here in the Masechet. So he says, Noshim shenesu mishum shnios, they fall into two categories. Yesh mehem sheisura nu mishum sheyesh ka'osa tzura kurva isadorais. Some are prohibited because they are duplicates of a kind of kurva which the Torah prohibits. Kigon, the Torah prohibits imo, and now the Rabbanon b'din shnios prohibit emi imo. V'yesh mehem sheisuru b'shvil sheisrachaku me'arayos atzmo. Even sheyesh bahem ezu kirva. Again, the first category is what? That same shame, so to speak, which he calls tsura, has its doraisa. So you have imo, and you have emi imo. So emi imo is imo. That's what the Rabbanan did. That's called tsuras kurva. Okay, that we understand. Now we have a different category of shniyos harais, which is Yideshi Yisrachaku me'arayos atzman, Kevan sheyesh mehen eze kurva, so they should domos lekurva. I'm not sure, he doesn't give an example of this. Do you have an example in your Gemara, maybe? Also, Shniyas Hasuras Merabanim Yisheshem Tzuras Kurva Shalahem Shehem Yoser Krovos Isur Dorais Any Sur Posek Liol the Afla Malamehem Matamehem Asuros Ad Sof Kol Adoros Gon Bito Ubas Bito V'Kein Holam Omnam Elu Shasuros Mishum Shem Domos Li Elu Sheish Bem Seira Mishum Isur Dorais Rak Hein Levadon Asurot Avak Shekurvasam Rechoka Mimasha Huska Rebraisa V'Elef Hein Mutaris Legam. So again, right now I have it a little bit vague, and hopefully we'll fill in the flesh and blood here, but on a vague level, you'll tell me what you have in your commentary. What I have here is the following, that sometimes that shame Isur on a Doraisa level now applies one generation above or below, and it has that shame Isur, and then we apply it down the line. So we're going to have Aim Emo and Aim Emo, and it goes all the generations. But then you have something which is prohibited, not because of that chain Isur, but because of a certain relationship between him and her. They're already like Kroven. But that's going to only apply to her, but not to the next generation, because that's already too far removed. So if it's the shame, Erva, Aim, Emo, she's Emo, then it goes Aim, Emo. If it's Bas, Bito, Bas, Bito, etc., the Chol Adoros. And that I understand. But if it's Machmas Kurva, he calls it Kevan sheyesh bahen ezo kurva. Osrum, the Chachamim prohibited them if they change nomots la kurva. Right? So I want to see a relationship. I mean, it's again a very subtle distinction. We'll have to flesh it out. But in such a case, the Isur is only on them, but as you get to the next generation, there's a weaker chain of kurva, and therefore becomes mut. So let's see if we can flesh this out. Omar Ra, Arba Noshim Yeshlan Hefsek, In Noket Rav Biyode Tlas. If I understand correctly, Rav had some sort of tradition that amongst the Shnios Larayos, there are 4 Shnios, which they are Asuros, but when we get one step beyond that, Rechokos, there's no Gzeira D'Rabbanan. But Rav, although he had such a Kabbalah, amongst the 4 that Yesh Lahem Hefsek, Naked Rav Yodi Tlas, he was only aware of 3. He wasn't sure about the 4th category. Which were the 3 that he knew about? Eshes Achi Ha'em. So his mother has a brother, which is his uncle, obviously, and he married a woman. That woman is an erva, midarabanan of shnios, but it's not going to be passed on to the next generation. Just one second. Eshes achi ha'em min ha'av. Wait a minute, I got confused here. What's min ha'av? Achi ha'em. It's my mother's brother. Min ha'av. What does min ha'av mean? He tells you to look in Sira Kuf Tzadi Aleph. See if that helps me. From Nosas Rivka, the Yodalo Esna. All right, changing colors a little bit. A Nosa Esara, the Yodalo Es Yocheved. And I've told you Yocheved are half sister and brother, am I right? They share the same father. Nimtza shenaftoli hu achi Yocheved min ha'av. Naphtali and Yocheved share the same father. They have different mothers. One is Rivka, one is Sarah. Yocheved bas Leah. Leah ben Aaron. So do we have it? Let's see. We have, wait a minute, who is Yocheved again? We said that Avram married Rivka and he married Sarah. So Yocheved is the daughter of Avram and Sarah. Okay, now Yocheved has a bas whose name is Leah. So she's the granddaughter of Avram and Sarah. Leah ben, and now Leah has a son who would be the grandson of Avram and of Rivka. Just one second, did I get that right? Because Leah is the daughter wait a minute, who is Leah again? Let me get this straight here. Avram Nosses Rivka, Yodelo is Naphtali, Nosses Sarah, Yodelo is Kevin. Okay, Yocheved Bas Leah Ben. Where is Leah here? Got confused. Oh, I'm sorry. My mistake, sorry. So Yocheved has a daughter by the name of Leah. So Leah is the granddaughter of Sarah and Avram. Is that correct? Sarah and Avram had a daughter named Yocheved, and Yocheved has a daughter named Leah. Now Leah has a daughter named Aaron. So Aaron, if I understand correctly, is the son of Leah, the grandson of Yocheved, and the great-grandson of Sarah and Avram. Now we said that Avram had another wife named Rivka, and they had a child named Naphtali. Nasa Naphtali Esrachim. Umeis Naphtali. Are Aaron mutter b'Rachel Eshes Naphtali. Achi Yocheved Em Ima. Nochmal. Are Aaron mutter b'Rachel Eshes Naphtali. Achi Yocheved Em Ima. We're trying to get the relationship between Rachel and Aaron. And Rachel is the wife of Naphtali, who is Achi Yocheved, right? Because Yocheved and Naphtali share the same father, correct? So Yocheved and Naphtali are sister and brother through their father. And Rachel is the wife of, again, how is Aaron related to Naphtali? Aaron's
mother is Leah.
Right, so what's Aaron's relationship to Naphtali? He's like a great nephew or something like that. So he's a great nephew, and he's allowed to marry his great uncle's wife. Lefisha ein b'dorosehem edus ervas doraisa. Regam eshes achi imo ein asura min haTorah. I guess this is one of three cases where it doesn't go down another generation. That's the impression I get.
Couldn't marry his uncle's, marry his great uncle's.
Okay. What are we up to now? Now we're up to Eshes Ha'i Av Min Ha'em. Okay, Anasul Dodo Shi Ach Oviv Min Ha'em. Rak Hi Asura. He's not allowed to marry his uncle's wife. Aval Anasul Li Ach Me Ha'em Shel Savo. if we're going back to the generation of his grandfather, Muteres, the Kaloso, what is this? Kalas. What is the next word there? I can't read the next word. Kaloso. Anybody else have this word here? John, do you have this? You have a Masifta, right? What is the word after kalas?
I think it probably is she be toe without the chet.
Oh, I see. It should be kalas bito. It's a printing error.
Yeah, it's a misprint.
Misprint. Oh, we've had this was okay. So we have now kalas bito, his daughter's daughter-in-law, is Rakakias, kalas bas bito muteres, who's the iri mosif af eshes avi imo. We're talking about his grandfather's wife. And she's Asurolov, but if it would be Eshes Sav Imo, which would be, I guess, his great-grandfather, then he can marry his great-grandfather's wife. If I got that correct. Omar of Nachman Bar Yitzchak, the Simonov, the Eloi de Ra. He says, Dor Echad Me'al Ra. Even Sharav Shona Liel, Sheishis Dodo Mitzad Imo Yeshla Efse, Uzeiri Hosif Dor Acher Lamala, Eshes Sabo Sad Imo. Right, Rav, the Rav, my time a little chosh. Now the Gemara is asking, why couldn't Rav add Eshes Avi Imo? And that would be another case of Shniel Sheichlam Hefsei. Says the Gemara, Shema Michlafa Le the Eshes Avi Aviv. So this is a chashash of Rav. That Eshes Avi Imo, if it has a hefsek, we're going to confuse it with Eshes Avi Aviv, which is Ein La hefsek. Why? Kevon Yesh. What's the difference between Eshes Avi Aviv and Eshes Avi Imo? I mean, what's the difference here? It says, Kevon Sheyesh Ba Isa Doraisa Ba Os Kurva Yomru Shigam Lo Yesh hefsek. Does anybody figure that out? Again, we're comparing two cases that sound like that. It's between maternal and paternal, but he says there's Eshes Avi Imo, and that has a hefsek. And then there's Eshes Avi Aviv, and that has no hefsek. I don't see why. You have a footnote there, maybe? Don't answer at once. Can't hear so many voices at once. Siri is not worried about Shemiach Lifenu as Eshes Saviv Mitzad Imo and Eshes Saviv Mitzad Aviv. The Chosam, in the case of Mishpachas Aviv, Shchiach Li'ozir, Rogil Lelech, Yodesh, in the base Aviv, Yesh Yoser, Isrei Kurva Min HaTorah, Chacha, base Mishpachas Imo, Shchiach Li'ozir, Kein Lo Yite Odom Lahachlif, Bein Eshes Saviv Mitzad Imo, the lahatir af eshes sabav mitzad of. Now the Gemara asks also, like Halotzo is the third case of Kalas Bito, I get it. Here on Chafal from the days, the Oraisa, the Chsiv, Ervas Kalosol Sigala. Yeah, but we're talking about Emo, we should say Kalas Bino or Kalas Bito. Kalas Bino Yeshla Hefsek. Tanya Kaloso Ereva and Kalas Bino Shnia. Okay, so far so good. V'chena Omer the Kalas Bino v'Kalas Ben Bino at Sof Kol Adoros. Wow. Why is that so? At Sof Kol Adoros, I guess it has that shame. You remember that shame Kaloso, so it goes through all the generations. So therefore, we couldn't say that Rav would classify Kaloso as Yesh Hefsek, because in fact Kaloso has no Hefsek. Ela Ema Kalas Bito. Okay, why is that different? Because HS Nechto Mibito. So Isur Bekalas Bito Eno Mishumar Chokol Arayos Do Raisok Kishekurvosam Shava. It's not creating another case of that same kurva. Lo osru bekurva hapchusa hemena. Omer Avchizda ha milsa migaver Rava Shmieli umanu Rabbi Ami lo osru kala elam ifnei kala. The Omru Li Kaldoi are the sky readers, right? The what do you call it? The star, the star readers that read things into the stars. Malfana Havis. You should be a chacham. I guess it's some sort of idiomatic expression. Amina I Gavarava Havina. Yochol Anili Asbara Midaiti Aval I Mikri Dardakia. If they were, I guess, insulting me and saying I just could teach children, then I won't be able to explain Midaiti. Ash'ailo Mirabonon the Osu Beiknishta. I'll ask the Chacham that come into the Beis HaKnesses. Hashta Sabarta Midai. I know how to interpret it on my own. Lo Osru Kalas Bito Elimishum Kalas Bino. So we're afraid if we allow you to marry the daughter-in-law, the daughter of your daughter-in-law, who is Kalas Bito, then he might come to marry Kalas Bino, the daughter-in-law of his son. Umuchach, what do we see from this? She'eni surah me'ikra din, ke'kalas b'no, surah me'ikra din, kevan she'yesh b'b'no, ofen she'kala asura midaraisa, kigoneshes b'no. L'chein gam kalas b'no, one generation down, asura. Ach b'bito, lekad sad kala, man. The Torah never prohibited the kala of your daughter. right? So you don't have that first generation that you can take it down to the next generation. In the case of Ashes Beno, that's Kaloso Doraisa. So now you could say Ashes Ben Beno. L'chein lo osur es kalas bito l'mishum chashash shem yachlifenu olam b'kalas beno v'yatireru. L'chein osur af os. Omlei abai l'rova aspra loch kigon kalosa debei bar tzisa. Hoysalo kalas haben b'kalas habat. He gave an example of two kalas. One is from his son, one is from his daughter. Rav Papa, I could go kalosa debei Rav Papa bar ab. Again, hoysalo kalas haben b'kalas habat. Rashi we could go kalosa debei Mori bar Isik. Again, hoysalo kalas haben b'kalas habat. Then he says, "We did Torah Ashes Dodo to Ach Aviv Kisheshnei Av Echad Asura Shenemar Erbas Achi Avicha Lo Sigala El Ishto Lo Sikrav Dodos Chahi Ulekamon Mivaeres HaGemora Shekavonas HaPosuk the Ashes Achi Ha'av Mina'av Aval the Ashes Achi Ha'av Mina'em Minatorah Muteris. So the wife of your mother's brother, according to Torah law, you're allowed to marry. Whereas the wife of your father's brother, you're not allowed to marry. Gozu chachamim af bechelek misha'ar noshim nishos hadodu, and the Rabbanon added other wives of your uncles. La osra mishum shnios li eshes achi of, which we said was doraisa eshes achi of. And the Gemara is a suffix. Which of the uncles were included in that gzera that you're not allowed to marry their wives? And which were the uncles that were not included in the gzera? So that's going to be tomorrow's Gemara, Belineda. Iboilu eshes achia em. These are all aunties that are married to your uncles. Here on the bottom of Daf Kaf Aleph Amid Beis. Well, what is tomorrow? Tomorrow's Tuesday, right? So Iboilahu. Let's see if we can find it so we can note here. Iboilahu, right after the two dots. Okay, then that's where we're going to stop for today.